I am Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Soucy.
And we're paranormal specialists who live in the most haunted city on earth, Savannah, Georgia. Every day is Halloween in our line of work, so join us as we spin true tales of haunts, murders, and disturbing Savannah history. I'm Madison.
I'm Chris.
And welcome to the most haunted city on earth.
Hello and welcome to the most haunted city on earth podcast. I'm Chris Soucy.
And I'm Enoch Edenfield.
And I'm JT Timmons.
And today we have a special episode, not just because Madison is missing. That makes it strange and peculiar and odd and a mystery. Ooh. Whatever happened to Madison? Ooh.
I didn't kill her.
That's absolutely true. For now.
They always look at the spouse.
That's true, yes.
Yeah.
If anyone's to blame, Madison is actually out ill. She is not feeling well, so she is sitting this one out. And it's a shame because today is going to be a real banger of an episode. Of course, we do have some new Parajunkies to thank.
Yes, we do. All right. Let me go ahead and thank Maria Cruz, Angie Fenton, Jen Merck, Destiny, Melissa Ducote, and Lindsay Waffle. I love the last name on Lindsay Waffle. I love that. Yes.
Now I want waffles.
All the people that I just mentioned are getting ad-free episodes and exclusive content and all types of fun stuff. So become a Parajunkie.
And you can become a Parajunkie by going over to our Patreon, which is at the Haunted City Podcast. You can find us on Patreon just by tapping those little words in, Haunted City Podcast.
Yes.
Do you have a Patreon?
I do.
Oh,
perhaps we should be plugging up
Everyone
Patreon
loves
too,
Eni.
because here's another. Eni's got an amazing Patreon. Push it.
No pressure. Yeah, it's just my name, Enoch Edenfield, on Patreon. But I do exclusive videos. I do exclusive lives over there, and working on a few other things.
Yes. Also, if you're not following Eni on TikTok, you got to follow Eni on TikTok. You do so many lives.
Yeah.
I'm constantly like, oh, Eni's on.
It's like Savannah's TikTok.
It is indeed.
I try to roam the streets at night.
Yeah, she does. Madison and I'll be like going to grab dinner, like a late dinner, and we'll just like run into Eni just randomly, and she's live streaming. She's like, "What's up?"
Always entertaining, always great. Also, Eni does walking tours.
Yep. I own and operate my own ghost and history tour company, Enoch Edenfield Tours. Very original name.
Yep. Hey, you know what you're getting.
Yep.
It's straight up. Yeah. And it's the one woman show, and it's an excellent opportunity. And we try to send anybody who is looking for a good walking tour your way because we watch the walking tours too often.
Yes.
That's one of the fun things about going on TikTok Live. So today's episode, we're actually going to be talking about animals' purported psychic abilities. And animals are, of course, renowned for having this incredible intuition and this incredible ability to see through the veil or sense things before they happen. And that's kind of what we're going to be talking about. And Eni actually has a partner in crime in your tours. Do you want to tell us a little bit about Vash?
Yes. So my dog Vash is with me almost all the time. He's at daycare today, so he's getting a little bit of a break. But anytime I go for walks, anytime I'm doing a live, he's there with me. I go walk in the cemeteries often, and he's with me again. And for the most part, he's used to things. All the strangeness of Savannah he's gotten used to. So when he alerts to something, it's a big deal.
Absolutely. Yeah. And all of us have had pets that at one time or another just freak us out. Everybody's had that dog that just like suddenly looks in the corner and there's absolutely nothing there. And you're just like, what are you looking at? What is it? Don't do that. Stop. Or a cat. It's especially weird when a cat does it because the cat is already kind of like conspiratorial. That cat is up to that cat is planning your demise. And then all of a sudden it's like, and you're like, well, what are you looking at? I don't understand it. And then they get down.
Oh, yeah,
'cause
they
the way
hunch.
they hunch, or their back goes up, and you're like, oh no, you're looking like a Halloween greeting card. That's a no-go.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're going to be talking about animals and their abilities to sense things that we cannot.
Yeah.
And first up is, of course, natural disaster, because that is a classic story that comes time and time again before and around natural disasters. Animals are oftentimes the first indicator that something is about to happen, sometimes even before there are scientific measurements for what's about to happen. One of the stories that we actually researched and brought up was the tsunami in 2004.
Yes.
Because in the tsunami in 2004, they saw like elephants running for high ground and all of the animals pulling away from the coastline. And it's like those animals knew intrinsically that there was something going on. And the question is, was it a psychic ability, or was it some kind of sense that we as human beings have removed ourselves from the natural order so we don't have that natural sense of when something is off kilter?
Yeah. Yeah, Native Americans have been, doing that for a while, like watching animals and all that. I mean, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Animals are incredible indicators. What are your thoughts on the phenomenon of animals detecting like natural disasters?
Well, growing up in Florida, as some of us did, anytime there was a hurricane, even without having a meteorologist, which we have the benefit of today, there was this eerie calm. And, I grew up in rural Florida Panhandle, lots of animal noises. And growing up, I remember every day, the day before the hurricane, there would be this complete stillness. No bird sounds, no dogs barking, and it was just completely silent. And then, of course, you get the crash of the hurricane after that.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because like there's nothing quite as eerie as like being out in the woods, like camping or something, and you have all those like, crickets and cicadas and everything just spraying, and then it just goes silent, and you're like, oh, something's here.
I immediately think witchcraft when that happens.
I'm thinking Bigfoot.
Not demons this time?
Not demons this time. No,
Not
no,
demons.
no. Not demons.
Because demons come with bugs buzzing and, the creepy crawlies all crawling, creeping.
But even recently, when we were worried about Idalia hitting us,
Right.
I was out the night before, and it was completely silent downtown, like eerily silent. And then I went out the night after, and like you could hear the frogs in the fountains and the insects and everything. And it's like,
It's fascinating, and that's such an amazing thing, because whatever it is that they are attuned to has that pattern, because it's we actually did not get hit bad at all by Idalia as it came through. We were very lucky. It certainly was bearing towards us, but that gives you this idea of the scope of this kind of premonition. Is the threat is apparent, and the threat seems to be a condition that animals can pick up on in whatever animalistic intuition they have. Another big story that people like to talk about are earthquakes.
Yeah.
Because earthquakes are also oftentimes preceded by animal behavior, strange animal behavior. In 1989, the San Francisco earthquake was preceded by a lot of animals acting very peculiar. Just noting that you're like, oh, why is the dog behaving this way? Why is this dog running in circles like this, and why? And one of those things was, oh, you know what? This animal is actually reacting to a seismic shift that was barely perceptible by any of the most sophisticated, equipment. And then, boom, you had this earthquake.
Yeah.
And so there comes again the idea: is it supernatural, preternatural, or is it just natural? And we have removed ourselves from that type of divination, that type of understanding of what's going on.
Yeah, I definitely think like starting with weather, we're going in the natural direction, like for sure. I'm not super convinced that it is supernatural at all, but like with I was reading before we started some of Madison's research with Nancy Best and her dachshund, and how her dachshund found her breast cancer tumor.
Right,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, she supposedly what happened is one of the most widely reported cases is that of Nancy Best. Her dachshund Mia would continuously sniff a specific spot on her owner's breast. When Nancy went for a checkup, doctors discovered that she had breast cancer right where Mia had been sniffing. After surgery to remove the tumor, Mia no longer showed any interest in that spot. Like that for me is like, all right, maybe that's passing the line of natural and to supernatural.
Well, I mean, yes and no, because if it's something that doesn't belong, the dog's interest, and can smell it, because I think there are now dogs specifically used to detect things. I think non-Hodgkin's lymphoma is
They detect tumors?
Yeah. Absolutely. Tumor sniffing dogs.
That's crazy.
Well, when you think about like what we ask of dogs,
I'll retract that then.
what we ask of dogs a lot, people think that bomb sniffing dogs and drug sniffing dogs and all these
That's
things,
crazy.
trained to do this, they are smelling for minute traces of chemicals and things like that. And so, in the case of like a disease and a dog trying to sense a disease, one would imagine that a dog recognizes the smell of your health, the smell of what you are normally. And if something changes, that may very well concern the dog. Like, I know we're fostering just a beast of a dog right now. And sometimes her intense concern for what's in my face, I think is directly linked with what I ate recently. So, it's like, that's not something that is normally the smell of your face. And so in my mouth is the sniffer. And I'm like, oh, please. Because I think that it's like, oh, that is not normal. That is, what did you eat? What did you have? What did you put inside you? And I'm sure it's done with love, but it feels like I'm being accosted. So, yes, I think that to some degree, there's the natural concept that disease might have a scent or a thing, but I think that supernatural element is that it's danger, that it understands that it's a disorder, because that's not necessarily something that just automatically comes to mind when you smell something that is different, or that when a dog detects something that is different. You always hear that when you go to somebody's house and, oh, they smell my dog on my pants, and the dog is all over your sniffing. But when a dog becomes concerned, when it shows concern because it recognizes that it might be something dangerous, that it might be something harmful.
For sure.
That, how does that register? What is there a smell that's like, that smells like death, that smells like something bad is happening inside you.
Well, what about dogs and even cats at retirement centers who have gone and laid down next to people? Like, there was a story of a cat, I can't remember where, but this cat hated people, but was at some type of retirement center, and the staff noticed that this cat would go and lay with people who were about to die.
Well, I think Stephen King used that story in Dr. Sleep. In the book Dr. Sleep, it was literally the cat would sit at the foot of somebody who was about to die. Interesting. And that is common enough. You get this very interesting idea, because here's a great example of what might qualify more in the psychic realm and supernatural realm. We had a Cocker Spaniel. We'll start the story by saying that my dad, Special Forces, Sergeant Major, tough as nails guy, Vietnam vet, always wanted a dog named Saber, and he wanted it to be a German Shepherd named Saber.
Good name.
The first dog we got was a floppy dog named Mops.
Floppy dog named Mops.
And then we got a Cocker Spaniel named Libby. So the Cocker Spaniel named Libby. So Cocker Spaniels are temperamental animals.
Yes.
But one night, this dog just started howling.
Ooh.
In a way that hurt your heart when you knew this dog was in pain. So we were thinking it hurt itself, and we were trying to figure it out, but inconsolable. We went to the vet, and the vet happened to be the kind of broker that got Libby to us. And when we brought Libby in, he was like, "Oh no, what's wrong?" I said, "Oh, she's just howling. She's just howling." He's like, "That's so weird because Libby's father died."
Whoa.
Just last night. Libby was howling.
Whoa.
In such a way that was mournful. And we learned that Libby's father had died that night.
Wow.
And I was like, that's more than,
No, for sure.
that there's definitely something there. And I've heard stories like that before, especially like when you hear stories of animals whose owners pass away, and the animal knew it, and the animal started crying or making these sounds because they recognized the shift, because they experienced the world in a different way. They're experiencing, energy in a different way, and when it's removed, they know.
Yeah. I always get so worried when, like, I go on vacation or something like that, that when I leave Argyle and Tartan, that they are like, did he die?
Oh,
like,
sure.
Is he gone forever?
Right.
And, like, I get so concerned about that. I'm like, and there's nothing I can do because I'm like 1,000 miles away, and it's just like,
Well, but I think that it is safe to assume that an animal understands your presence in the world, and maybe you're gone a distance, but like you could spend all day watching soldiers returning home to their dogs. So,
right.
These beautiful videos of the dog being like, you're back. So I think there is something to the idea that maybe animals do perceive our living essence and understand it. And unfortunately, I don't think animals really have a concept of time. So when you're gone, even for a minute, it's like forever. It's just gone. But yeah, I find that interesting that there are medical study groups that believe that that dogs can sniff out tumors and disorders and certain illnesses. Yep. And some dogs, I think, are more attuned to different illnesses. Like some dogs are just good at a very specific type of cancer. So I think that that does border on the absolutely supernatural in the sense of they detect it sometimes before even our tests detect it. Or before we're able to, before there's any symptoms, before there's anything like that. So, so that is a big one. Right there.
I know for a fact that my dogs watch me and Madison more than we actually watch them. Like pay attention to them. I mean, we obviously can figure out if something's going wrong really quick with them if they're not eating and stuff like that. But the moment that I get a fever or something, they're more, I don't know, attached and worried, and Argyle lick my face when I have a fever. It's weird. And so I guess to cool me down, you know.
Sure.
So it's I don't know. It's pretty cool how in tune they are to their owners and people they care
the health
about.
of the pack.
We don't deserve dogs.
No,
we just don't.
Absolutely not. No.
That's the
certainly
truth.
not.
But yeah, I think the story of the cat is it makes you wonder, does it actually sense the body shutting down, or is there a paranormal aspect to that?
Well, yeah, that's an excellent question.
Yeah. Cats especially.
Oh, yes.
Always seem to have one foot in the other realm, right?
Well, there's many cultures that believe that cats stand at the threshold. And when you think of a person who is passing or dying, the door is opening and the cat knows. Ideally that the door is opening and goes to be where the door is, so that, and this is a fascinating series of belief structures that come from many different cultures. The idea that cats kind of protect this realm, they sort of people say that the reason why they sleep so much is because they're actually defending us in a dream threshold, and that the dream threshold, when we dream, is actually the closest to the other side that we get to. So the dream threshold is where death passes and our spirit goes through and all these things happen. And the cat, whenever it pierces into the waking world, wants to be on the right side of that door to make sure nothing bad comes through.
Yeah.
I love that theory.
It's a great story, you know, and it's funny because it's utilized in lots of stories. Lots of people have. I think Neil Gaiman has written a wonderful cat story about the dream threshold, and H.P. Lovecraft, of course, had a long time love of cats and their position between the horrors of the universe and our world. But cats are always held in this high reverence.
Oh yeah.
For that purpose. They are mystical animals in many ways, although they are seemingly diabolical at times.
So a couple points that Maddie made in her research for this episode was staring at empty spaces. We already mentioned that a little bit. One of the most common stories of pets staring intently at a seemingly empty space, or one of the most common stories is of pets staring at an empty space. Owners will sometimes notice their dog or cat fixedly watching a specific spot in the room, sometimes following it as if it has an invisible entity is moving.
I have a story about that. I don't think I've told it on this podcast before.
Okay.
So when I first moved to Savannah in 2010, I moved into this really awesome old Victorian house over on East Henry Street that had been split into 3 apartments. The first floor was 1 apartment, second floor was 2 apartments, and I had one of the upstairs apartments. As I'm moving in, my neighbor from across the hall comes over to introduce himself. And he said, "Hey, what do you think about ghosts? Do you believe in ghosts?" And I'm like, that's a really weird warm-up question.
Yeah, that is
Out of the gate. Welcome to Savannah.
And I was like, yeah, sure. Like, I grew up in the South. Like, I've seen some things. And he said, okay, cool. My apartment's haunted. He might come over to yours. Normally, he just stays in mine. I just wanted to give you a heads up in case you experienced anything strange. And I was like, all right,
Hey.
welcome to Savannah.
It's pretty thoughtful, though, really.
Yeah.
Now, I had 2 cats at the time, Wim and October. And every once in a while, after this neighbor moved out, he had been there for a year and he moved to another town. When that apartment was vacant, they would stop and stare at the doorway into our shared hallway. And I actually went out there one time thinking that maybe our landlord had come up. No one out there. And they would only do it when the apartment was vacant. After that neighbor moved out, another woman moved in. She was only there for a little bit. She was going through a divorce, so I assumed that she moved out because of that.
Sure.
And again, when the apartment was vacant, they would stop and stare at the door. Now, my neighbor had told me what the ghost name was. I totally forgot because I'm terrible with names. And so the first time it happened, I was like, okay, that's kind of weird. But then when it kept happening, I thought I should probably say something. So I just look over towards the door and I said, hey, Bob, I don't actually remember your name. We're just going with Bob right now. How's it going? Look around if you want. I'm sure you're bored because there's nobody in the apartment across the hall. You're cool. Just don't mess with anything. And yeah, it was only like that when the apartment was vacant. Then a third set of neighbors moved in. Nothing after that.
Wow. Sure. Well, and that's another thing that that we've talked about a lot on this is these spirits. They're drawn to life, you know. And people are always like, "Oh, that old abandoned house is so haunted and everything." It's like, well, they're just dying for some. They're just hoping that some living thing will come close enough for them to interact and engage and participate in the living world. And so, it makes sense that when no one's in the apartment and they're just kind of muddling around, they're like, well, right across the way, there's, I can just go and poke my head in there and look around. And the fact that you have that moment when the animal just, I had an experience. I was walking my dog on the dueling grounds, and my dog just came to a sudden stop. And
was this Starry or
no? This is Ranger.
Okay,
I just came to a sudden stop, and it was just like, oh, okay. And Ranger was not the most focused animal. We'll just go ahead and say that. And not the most interested in anything. Ranger was very much like a cat in a lot of ways. Very ignores everything, just flops around, just kind of hangs off the sides of the furniture, like like I spilt a dog on the couch. And so it was very interesting how alert Ranger was at that moment. And then Ranger sat. But there's this way that dogs sit. When you command a dog to sit, there's a very jerky motion that they make. You know that somebody said sit because they're not just like sitting to relax or anything. And so he just like sat, like somebody told him to sit, and he was like looking straight up. And I was just like, what is happening? And that was the other thing, was the way that his head was suggested that whoever told him to sit was very tall, taller than I was. Wow. And I'm tall. I'm 6'4", and so whatever it was above where my head would have been to look into the eyes. And I just sat there for the longest time, and then snapped right out of it and started running around again.
Wow.
And it was so bizarre. It really did. It was one of those things where it's like that encounter had these beats to it, where because when Ranger was outside, so. Ranger inside, liquid dog. Ranger outside was everywhere at once dog. So it was really weird to see him just stop and stand for a second. And then it was really weird to watch him sit like that, because it was that response when you tell him sit, and you know that because they're like, oh, I know this one. It's like there's a response mechanism going on.
Was there a tree like it wouldn't have been a squirrel like where he was, because I know he's a hunting dog.
He was a hunting dog.
Yeah.
And he would point.
Okay.
So he would point if he saw something that he was hunting.
Sure.
This was not a point. This was something's here. Somebody's standing in front of me. And we were in the middle of the dueling grounds. So like between the playground, by the way, if you ever make your way to Savannah, Georgia and go to the Colonial Park Cemetery, on the south side of the cemetery, there's a lovely playground to remind the children that they can't play forever.
Or they can.
Or perhaps they can. But on the dueling grounds, it's like a stretch of grass. And it's kind of free of trees and obstruction. And so we were just walking. And another note is that the cemetery actually extends beyond the fence line, because what the cemetery is right now is a condensed, fenced-in version of a much larger cemetery that we were like, oh, we need a road here. We just squish it in. We just squish it in a little. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
All right. So the next one is actually reacting to unheard noises. Dogs barking, growling, or whining at seemingly nothing can be quite unsettling. Many pet owners have stories of their dog suddenly becoming agitated and growling at a corner where nothing appears to be present. And then avoidance behavior. There are tales of cats refusing to enter certain rooms or areas of a house. Some dogs, too, might suddenly become reluctant to go into a specific part of the house where they were previously comfortable.
Oh, absolutely. There are lots of people who will bring their dogs to scary places. A good piece of equipment for a ghost hunt is, a small manageable dog, because oftentimes they will alert you to changes that cannot be detected through, normal means. But I have heard of the animals who won't go into a certain area or will avoid a certain thing. I want to say there's a story about a family who got a chair from an antique store, and when they brought it in, the animal was, I think it was a cat, was like always very skittish around the chair and would not go near the chair. And where it would sit in your lap if you're in any other chair, if you sat in that chair, it would avoid you like the plague. I was like, that's a bad chair.
Yeah.
Recently, I took Vash with me to the Sorrel Weed House because during the day they have history tours that they allow dogs on.
Oh, that's sweet.
Oh, boy.
Right? So maybe you and Madison should take Yos's dogs.
I think that's a great idea. That's awesome.
So we get there. It starts in the courtyard. Vash is having the best time. There's some great smells. People are giving him dog treats. He was like, this is amazing. Why aren't we here all the time?
This is my new favorite place.
Yes. Then they take us into the basement.
Oh, yeah. No. I can't imagine that went well.
He hated it down there. He was so skittish, so ready to get out of there. Once they took us up to the first floor, he was like, "Oh, thank God."
Really?
I
And
don't
the Sorrel
know.
Weed House
Yeah.
is phenomenally haunted.
Oh, yeah.
And that basement, and even just being with human senses in the basement, there are certain things. There's a smell to that basement that is charged almost, because it's not like musk or mold. It's like a
Yeah, I know exactly.
almost
I know
ozony smell
Yeah.
to it.
that that's like the perfect way to put it. Is ozone.
Yeah, metallic-y or it's so strange, but you get that sensation that it's charged, that entire basement is just charged and ready to blow.
Well, they have that thing down there that runs at people. Supposedly, it's the it's like the shadow figure that people see. This like he's like really tall and he runs straight at you, and then you wince, and then he's gone. Maybe that's what Vash was saying.
Yeah, there were reports that the front of that parlor area was part of a trench during the Revolution where the Hessians buried their dead. So there's a lot of stories about that, because I think that was one of those questions was, is this a Hessian? And it's so funny because I think in early American parlance, a Hessian ghost was terrifying. The Headless Horseman is a Hessian, who lost his head in battle. But that notion, because the Hessians were such fierce fighters and such fierce warriors that, and they were mercenaries, so they were not fighting for something they believed in. They were just fighting because they were good at fighting, and so they became the villain of many a story, especially supernatural stories. So you imagine that it's easy to parlay. These are where the Hessians were buried. That's not good news.
So, how often does Vash see things? Because we know that he can see ghosts, but how often is that?
So we walk out at cemeteries often, and every once in a while he will stop. He will look ahead and look back at me. And oftentimes it's a tour group or something. So I'm like, yeah, I see those people. Those are people.
Yeah, those are real people.
And then sometimes he does it, and I don't see anything. And one time we were walking at one of our city cemeteries, and it was late fall, early winter. He looks up ahead on the path that we're on and starts to growl, hackles raised, ready to attack. And y'all have met my dog.
Yeah.
Like, he's very chill.
Yeah,
Oh yeah.
I have never seen him react like that
Whoa.
before. And that was where we had to go. Like, my car was on the other side.
Yeah.
So I just yelled out ahead. I was like, I don't know who you are. I don't care. We're not going to bother you. We're just trying to get to our car. We won't be back. And yeah, that was the only time I've ever seen him react like that in a
Goodness
cemetery.
gracious.
Yeah, there's nothing weirder than the growl, like out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And I've experienced it a couple of times with different dogs in my life, where you're late at night, you're just sitting there, and then all of a sudden there's that growl. That's
It's
yeah,
like,
it's
oh
like-
yeah,
it's
Argyle
like,
all day. Yeah.
what's happening, buddy? What do you see? And just like. And Ranger was a sleep talker. So while Ranger was asleep, he's like, but there was one time when it was a growl, and it was like the lowest and meanest sounding growl.
Oh wow.
And it was just like, okay, that's not the normal,
It's like a protective.
Yeah,
maybe?
it was like this
Like a
this deep
protective measure.
resonant growl, and you're like,
Yeah.
call the priest.
It makes you wonder. Like, not only can they see ghosts, can they tell if the entity is good or bad?
Oh, absolutely. Well,
That's
and that
the
was
crazy thing.
the interesting thing
Yeah,
with the Vash story was this notion that to a dog, it's possible that a lot of ghosts just look like people. That it doesn't register to them that there's something supernatural, but then there are entities that are probably darker and scarier. Entities that pose threats, and that could get the hackles up, and that could get the sensation of the protective animal, the protector animal coming in. So yeah, I think that that it's possible that dogs do not differentiate a lot of ghosts from people, But when something dangerous comes along, it's something that maybe non-human comes along. Because, think of how your dog reacts to other animals. There are a variety. Like right now, my dog Starry is very reactive to other dogs. So if it sees another dog, it gets very hyper. And sometimes when I'm walking Starry at night, Starry will look right into like a patch of dark, underbush and just do that, oh, it's a dog kind of sensation. And you're like, is there a dog under there or what?
Something else. Yeah.
Yeah, and she's strong enough to pull me. She's pulled me into the brush more than once.
Yeah, that's a muscle.
Yeah, it's
she
all
is
muscle.
A muscle. It is so true. All right, and then next one is the ghostly cat visitor, which is a woman claimed that after her beloved cat passed away, her other pets would often act as if they still saw the deceased cat. They would suddenly make space on the bed as if making room for another animal, or playfully interact with an invisible entity in the way that they used to play with the departed cat.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Savannah's full of ghost cats.
Yeah.
There are
So
many
many.
locations that celebrate ghost cats. I think O House has a ghost cat. Jones Street actually has a ghost cat that goes through several townhouses right between Abercorn and Drayton. The stories of the same cat just kind of like being in people's apartments. And it has no respect for boundaries. So it's just like running through the walls up and down that whole area.
Davenport.
I was gonna say one of the big touristy attractions. Davenport House has a famous cat that many people have seen and remark upon.
The Sorrel Weed House has a ghost cat. So does maybe not now, but the Hampton Lily Bridge.
Oh, right.
Someone saw Jim Williams' cat in a window after
That's
the cat had passed.
No way.
Yeah.
Wow. That's wild. All right. And then the next one is a dog's protective instinct. We were just talking about that. There was a story where a woman recounted her dog's behavior when she moved into a new apartment. Every night, the dog would stand in the doorway of her bedroom, facing outwards, growling lowly at the living room. This behavior was consistent, and the woman claimed she sometimes felt a cold chill coming in from the living room. She later learned a person had died in the apartment before she moved in.
Oh,
So
there you go.
Almost definitely seen a ghost.
Yeah. Probably.
Yeah.
It's a stranger danger.
Yeah. And then the Phantom Dog Walker is the last story. It's a man shared a story of his late night walks with his dog in a quiet neighborhood. Why are these all like so similar? That's crazy because you haven't seen this part. On multiple occasions, his dog would suddenly start wagging its tail and showing signs of excitement as if greeting a familiar person when there was no one in sight. After speaking to a longtime resident of the area, the man learned that another dog walker used to take the same route nightly but had passed away some years ago. Yep. That's wild.
One time, Vash and I were down on River Street, and it was around Thanksgiving. So Thanksgiving is usually pretty quiet down on River Street.
Absolutely.
Which is one of the few times I'll go down there.
Take note, everyone, if you're coming to Savannah.
So we were down there. I think I was doing a TikTok live, and Vash stops, looks ahead of us, and he does this particular like crouch and wiggle thing when he sees another dog.
Oh, yeah.
And he did that.
Couldn't see a dog anywhere.
No dogs. It was a well-lit area, too.
Huh.
There were no dogs. There were no cats. There was nothing.
No.
Yeah, it's fascinating to think that, the whatever blockers we as humans have put up so that we don't experience these things, animals don't have that. They're never told not to look for it. They're never told not to, participate with it. And in many cases, I imagine that the domestication of animals comes with this great, side order of paranormal. You are actually, because when you think about it, living with an animal is weird. We bring in another species into our lives: birds and dogs, fish and cats.
A much cuter species.
And and it's just, and we cohabitate with them and we care for them, and they return affections. But how strange is that?
Yeah.
And our barrier of understanding animals is paper thin, because we think we know everything about our pets. We think we know we have, a long list of explanations for every behavior that they have, but they are different creatures altogether and have different sensibilities and senses altogether. So because I think birds are an interesting thing, because birds aren't mammals, so they're like one step further removed.
Sure.
And when a bird goes nuts in their cage or something like that, it's like, I can't even fathom what it is.
Sure.
That has this bird in such a flustery position. Plus, some birds talk, and that will always serve as a weird notion to me, because we are taught. Well, I was taught when I was young that it's a mimicry, that the birds are mimicking, but over time it seems as though no, they are communicating. They understand what sound equals what thing.
Yeah.
And I hate to break it to you, that's talking. That's what we do. We learn what sound cup. I was taught cup means this. So if a bird is able to go cup and identify appropriately a cup, then it is communicating correctly. And I've heard tale of birds that have been able to call out to people who have died.
Sure.
Owners who have died. And since parrots live, because a parrot can live, 80 years? Yeah, like a long time. They can outlive their owners by a healthy margin. And then they were like, Roger. It's like, is Roger here? It's like, has a knife, run! You're like, ah! But I find it fascinating that we live with animals, because it's a strange practice.
Yeah. Well, this has been a super fun episode. Thank you so much, Eni, for joining us. It's just a short and sweet live stream. And next episode, Maddie will be back. Eni can be back too. We'd love to have her as a guest and invite her if she's available. But yeah, let's see. Any other? Oh, we got the Paracon coming up actually, they're hearing it now. So quit the episode out and head on over to the Paracon because you're hearing it on Saturday.
If you're in Savannah,
yeah,
the Paracon is going on. Look it up, Paracon Savannah. I think it's hosted by the
Wandering Further.
Wandering Further.
Cool. And you'll be there?
Yep. Not in official capacity, but I'll be hanging out.
Awesome. Hang out with us.
Yeah, hang out with us.
Of course.
So yes, absolutely. It's fascinating. An amazing roster of visiting paranormal celebrities coming into town, and they are hosting a lot of things. So if you are available and want to check out some very incredible stuff, there's ghost hunts being set up in some really awesome places, and talkbacks, and I believe a psychic reading from. Chip Coffee, and so yeah, absolutely, and be looking out for our October activities. We're fast approaching October, and we have been collaborating on some interesting October festivities for people who are interested in the area.
Yes,
for sure. All right, my name's JT Timmons.
I'm Chris Susi,
and I'm Enika Edenfield.
All right, stay spooky, y'all.